So, I want to do another video, and this is going to be my thoughts on the whole Grenfell situation that happened in London, Kensington in London. Now, Kensington is basically one of the richest boroughs in London, and last Thursday was the 1-year anniversary of the Grenfell Tower fire. In this fire, basically they've said that over 72 people died. However, my personal opinion, I feel the number was much higher than that. And my reason for this is because last week, I think it was last Monday, they showed a program on BBC One, and it was basically, they showed the firefighters after they put the fire out, which took ages. And also the forensics, they had to go through the block of flats to find people. And they mentioned that because the walls and the ceilings have collapsed, a lot of people, they ended up burning together. So you can imagine that people are burning to ash and bone. It's very horrific. And then you have to understand that because of that, because people are being burned together, you then have to individually go and find, looking at dental records just to be able to identify people, because sometimes that's all you can find is the teeth. So my issue is, if you see all those people that they found, the 72 people, but there could have been a lot more people that you don't know about, because obviously they're not going to be able to find everybody within that fire. Now, the reason this fire started is because I believe what happened was the Grenfell Tower got rejuvenated a few years before the fire last year, and they put this cladding on the outside of the building. And even though they knew that the cladding was not fireproof, they still put it on there. Now you have to understand that it's a system of failures, because obviously there was the manufacturers who created the cladding, and then it was the council who have to approve the cladding to be put onto the building in the first place. And then you have the actual people who put it on there. So if you know that the cladding is not fireproof, why on earth would you go and put it on the building? And apparently years before the building got rejuvenated, there was a number of complaints made by the people who was living in there about the tower block. There was a number of complaints, but yet they were not listened to. So then we had the issue what happened June 14th last year, where what happened was a fridge caught, I think it was a fridge or something, caught fire. And because obviously the cladding was not fireproof, boom, everything, just the whole place caught fire. Instead of the fire being confined to that one flat where the fire started, no, it spread literally everywhere. And then we have to also remember this: when people were aware of the fire starting and there were calls made to the emergency services, they were told, the residents living in these flats were told, no, we don't want you to leave your flats. We want you to stay in your flats. So a fire has started in this tower block, and you're telling people to stay. A lot more people would have survived had they not listened to that original advice. So that's another issue. They were told by the emergency services to stay within their block of flats. Now, what made it worse is this second issue. So first we had the cladding, which is not fireproof. Then the second issue is the building had absolutely no sprinklers. I think it either had no sprinklers or the sprinklers it did have were not working. So that's another issue. Whole tower block on fire, and there's no sprinklers. They're either not working or they just don't exist. Then you have cladding that is not fireproof. So if a fire starts, it's going to spread all over the building. Every single, if you see the building, it's completely burnt out. That's how bad the fire was. The heat was so great that people may have died of smoke inhalation, but then their bodies continue to burn, and they burn at such a high heat, they burn to ash. Just like if you died and you're cremated, that's how hot the fire has to be for you to be cremated. So then you're thinking of that heat. So, and the problem with this situation with Grenfell is you have to think about Britain like this. Britain is built upon racism and classism, and a lot of the people who lived in these block of flats were obviously ethnic minorities. There were black people living there, and there was immigrants as well. And I noticed that a lot of people did not seem to care like at all. People lost their lives and you don't care. So like obviously we talk about racism, and we speak about that a lot, but you also have to remember classism. Remember the people who lived in these block of flats, they either were working class or they were on benefits. So when you're at the bottom rung, when you're at the bottom rung of society, your value is not seen as worthy. So, and then for you to be an ethnic minority on top of that, you're even lower. Now there is this YouTube channel called The Grapevine, and they spoke about this. They spoke about it as well, because The Grapevine is this YouTube channel, and their original series were in America, but now they've come to the UK and they've done this UK series, and they spoke about Grenfell last week, and I actually watched it and agreed with so many of the points. That racism is a big thing, but you also need to remember class plays a big, and I mean big part in this as well. You cannot discuss Britain without discussing class, because you think about it, the Grenfell Tower was in the borough of Kensington, and Kensington is a rich borough, so it's like making me think. I mean, I don't even live in London, but it's making me think, how can you have such a rich borough and have a block of flats like that, and yet you don't seem to care? And yet I know plenty of people who live in London who have to drive past that tower block and they can't even look because it's so emotional. I mean, even me watching that documentary last week about Grenfell Tower Year One. It's on BBC iPlayer if you want to catch it. I'll post the link. But I was literally in tears, because it is just like, I don't think when it originally happened last year it hit me that much, but watching it like that, because you actually got to hear this time the survivors' story, and their stories just broke me. I mean, they had this one guy who lost his children and his wife. He lost his 3 daughters and his wife in that fire. And it just exposes the system of failures that started with the government having budget cuts in, and obviously the budget cuts go to the council, because obviously the council is no longer receiving funding from the government, so then they're limited in what they can do. So then instead of having cladding that is fireproof, I presume they're choosing the cheaper option. The cheaper option is the one that is not fireproof. And then obviously another cheaper option is obviously not having those sprinklers. I mean, you have a massive tower block and you don't want to put sprinklers on the building. Where is the sense in this? People lost their lives, and it's apparently I only found out from watching the Grapevine episodes on the Grenfell situation. I only found out that there was a similar tower block that burned down a few years before the Grenfell incident, and it was basically a similar situation. Whenever it's a tower block full of working class people, when that happens, people just tend not to care, and it's heartbreaking. So many people lost their lives. I mean, even think about it now. I think they said like something like 220 people are still homeless, and it's been a year. So what? And the government promised after Grenfell, they promised, like, I think it was a month or so, that they was going to rehouse every single person, and yet some of these people are still living in hotels. So technically they're not homeless because they're living in a hotel, but you have to understand it like this: it's not a home. They have shelter and they have a roof over their head, but it's not a home. If you talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what's the main three? That's what the main three things you want: shelter, food, a roof over your head. Stability is the main thing. Stability. You want to be able to move on with your life, but how can you move on with your life when you're having to live out of a hotel? I mean, it's okay for a holiday. It's okay if you just gonna go there for a couple of days, but it's been a year and they're still in a hotel. What's happened to the government's promises? Have they just washed their hands with it? Theresa May, my God. You are the freaking Prime Minister. And let's think about how long it took you to go down to Kensington in the freaking first place. When this incident happened, it took you so long to go down there. People were looking for reassurance. People were looking for a way to understand what happened, but no. You wanted to be a John Crow and not go down there. So as you can see, it is an enormous thing that's still not being addressed today. No full answers have been given. I don't believe no full answers have been given, and nobody is willing to be held accountable for what's going on. And it just makes you think that people always claim that this is Great Britain, and come over to this country and we will take care of you, when the truth is, if you are working class, nobody wants to really take care of you. And that's the issue. Nobody really wants to take care of you if you are working class. So working class, poor, if you're poverty stricken. And another thing that also got to me is that there were kids who died as well. I mean, if the government could feel nothing for the adults, then what about the children? What about them? Because some of the children, they survived Grenfell Tower and they still had to go to school the next day to do exams. What kind of madness was that? What kind of madness was that? They just been from a horrific ordeal, and they still had to go to school the next day to do exams. Now I understand that was around the time of the fight was GCSE season, but how are they expected to perform at their best when they don't even have a home? Like where was the concessions in place to say, yes, you've just been in a major fire, you could have died. We're going to excuse you from these exams for the time being. But there was none of that. It was just, yeah, you've been in a fire. We don't give a fuck. You got to go do your exams either way. But one thing to wrap this video up, one thing I will say is I was amazed at how many people donated and provided clothes and shoes and food and nappies for the people who were homeless. Those people who did that, those are the true heroes. The firefighters who put their lives at risk to rescue as many people as they did and to put the fire out. Those are the true heroes. Not the government, not the councils, not the manufacturers of that cladding. No, the true heroes are the firefighters. The firefighters and the people who donated their time, money and food. Those are the true heroes. That's when they showed that you can come together as a community and really show what a community is all about. So this is the end of this video. Let me know your thoughts on the Grenfell situation if you live here in the UK and you've heard about it, or if you don't live in the UK but you've heard about it. Let me know your thoughts so we can get a discussion started. Now I originally meant to do this video last week, but I thought let me leave it a little bit so I can get my thoughts together, so I'm able to bring this video to you today. These are my uncut thoughts about these situations, so just let me know your opinions. I will be responding back to everybody, and for the BBC iPlayer link, if you live here in the UK, if you've not seen that documentary, I will be linking it down below. Okay, bye.